From the off, I just want to say that I won't be comparing the Surge 2 to the Dark Souls franchise in any way. It's just too easy and too lazy to make these Dark Souls comparisons to any action RPG that places emphasis on defensive maneuvering, timing, parrying, and its overall combat mechanics. So I'm just not gonna do it. I am not going to mention Dark Souls. Not at all. Not even once. So let's crack on, shall we? Here's my review of Dark Souls in a sci-fi future 2. Oh, bollocks. Here's my review of The Surge 2. Developed by Deck 13 and published by Focus Home Interactive, the game continues on from the original Surge, which was set in a futuristic dystopian world where humans have been the catalyst to their own destruction, or very near destruction at least, due to the depletion of the world's natural resources. Creo, the corporate megatech company attempting to rectify this situation, created a quick fix called Project Utopia. The project uses nanites that were synced with humans. However, those mischievous nanites became self-aware, as they do in all good robot stories. Creo ruthlessly shut down the project, wiping out 95% of humanity, though most weren't killed. They were corrupted. The Surge 2 takes place in Jericho, a city that's been cordoned off in an attempt to stop these nanites. You can choose from 6 customizable characters, all known as the Warrior, but each has their own background narratives and each with varying dialogues. The Warrior was aboard a plane which crashes on the outskirts of Jericho City, and whilst on board, the Warrior started chatting with a little girl called Athena Gutenberg, a bit like Greta Thunberg, but more metaphorically inserted as the goddess of war, like her name would suggest, rather than the goddess of climate change and how dare you memes.
How dare you?
Well, it turns out that Athena is the granddaughter of the founder of Creo from the original Surge, Jonah Gutenberg. The Warrior survives the crash and wakes up in a prison after having visions of Athena. He escapes and begins his search for Athena and hopefully answers to what the bloody hell is going on. On his quest, he comes across numerous badly voice-acted twats who don't quite talk in the nonsensical cryptic riddles of Dark Souls NPCs, but their subpar performances don't add too much to the immersion either, sadly. The player comes across different factions such as the Children of the Spark, a cult that worships an energy that they've named the Spark. Genius. And then there's the Aid Disaster Relief Unit, whose intentions are questionable. The basic narrative of automatons gone rogue was passable in the original Surge, but the Surge 2 doesn't do much to evolve that narrative, unfortunately. The game plays from a style that's pretty familiar, a bit like Dark Souls, but not Dark Souls, because I promised not to mention Dark Souls. Dark Souls. I don't know whether it's because I've learned what to expect from this kind of third-person RPG or that it just feels just a little less challenging. Certainly in the beginning sections I felt like I was being forgiven for sloppiness and greediness. I think this could serve newer players well and prevent the early frustrations that every poor bastard encountered at the start of Bloodborne, for example. The difficulty does take a nice big spike once you reach the first boss though. The gameplay loop is exactly the same as the original Surge, which I recently reviewed if you want to go and check that out, but in a nutshell, start at Med Bay, that's your checkpoint, work your way through a linear level, don't die, kill enemies, earn tech scrap, that's your currency, pick up or search for weapons, implants and armor, find the next Med Bay or return to the previous one, spend your hard-earned tech scrap on upgrading your weapons and armor, and you're done. It's a pretty big nutshell. As with most games in this genre, if you die you lose all of your tech scrap and you've got one chance to return to the previous point you died to retrieve it, except Deck 13 have decided to be proper evil bastards and stick a time limit on for you to retrieve your tech scrap, which can be increased as you kill more enemies on your return, but if you die, it's gone for good. The combat is where the game truly shines. Deck 13 added a new directional parrying system which is extremely satisfying to use. We saw a glimpse of this in the original Surge, but only to jump or duck attacks from certain enemies. In the Surge 2, not only do you have to time it correctly, you have to flick the right stick in the correct direction too. It sounds difficult, but I actually found it slightly easier than most of the game's parrying systems, and it's a mechanic that encourages you to stay in the thick of things instead of always dodging out of the way. Dodging feels like a last resort, which is probably what it should be, and it certainly doesn't guarantee your escape from a death blow either. As it was with the original Surge, the player can target a specific body part or armoured body part of the enemy to either focus on that enemy's weak spot, which is highlighted in blue, or focus on the armoured body part, which will be highlighted in yellow. Dismembering the armoured parts will earn the player a new armour schematic or materials to upgrade that particular part. This is the Surge franchise's signature, and it's such an enjoyable mechanic that makes the farming process a much more fun experience that'll earn you some really interesting and beneficial armor sets, just like this golden armor set, making me feel like
the Golden God! I am untethered and my rage knows no bounds!
As you'd expect in these Souls-like games, the stamina bar is just as important as ever. Another fun element to the combat is the energy system though, the blue bar which fills by attacking enemies. There are segments of this blue bar, and filling one rewards the player with an injectable health replenishment, so it pays to be offensive. Being overly defensive leaves you vulnerable and potentially makes the game even harder. This is similar to Bloodborne's mechanic, where after being hit by an enemy, a few quick counterattacks can replenish that lost health. The boss battles were a definite weak spot in the original Surge, and sadly Deck 13 haven't really addressed this in the sequel. Again, they feel a bit more on the gimmicky side, without too many variations to their attack patterns for you to learn or phases to mix up the fight. Maybe it's just my experience playing these types of games, but they didn't feel that grueling to learn because the creativity in their attack patterns are basic at best. In fact, the later stages of the game, you'll face 3 different boss battles that are just repeated stages from previous boss battles that you've already defeated, and then there's 2 more boss battles that are just upgraded and larger versions of enemies that you've faced throughout the game already. That is just a lazy copy and paste filler job to beef out the game, which is a shame because I won't spoil too much, but there are 2 very decent boss battles, which proves that the devs can create large scale boss battles that do have variety, creativity and grandiloquent epicness. As you'd expect, there are some side quests that run alongside the linear quest line, though narratively these side quests, there are not much to get excited about, but they are definitely worth doing though because of the rewards that they offer. They are optional and different choices can often lead to different outcomes as well, which is nice. The level design is really impressive. Working your way through the level, unlocking each door as you progress, there's always that "oh look, I'm back here" moment when you open the door and you're right back at the start of the level with a lovely looking medbay staring you right in the face, waiting for you to cash all that precious tech scrap, and of course now you've got a shortcut. These moments are frequent and very enjoyable. It's amazing level design. Visually, I'd say the game is solid. There's some impressive lighting at times and some foreboding shadowy contrasts that the enemies will often be lurking in. Most of the game is set in the daytime like the original, and also like the original, venturing underground or down alleys. These pools of darkness really crank up the tension. Humans, however, are crap, which is a true statement in general, so the Surge 2 is essentially a documentary, but what I really mean is the facial animations of the human characters are just plain ugly, and considering there's a fair amount of dialogue in this sequel, I would have preferred a game that's only 3 years old to not look like everyone I meet is a ventriloquist that's pumped their faces rigid with a gallon full of Botox. For reference, I normally play at 4K on my desktop, but I'm on the road right now and this was running everything on max settings on a 3070 laptop at 1440p, and I was stable at 60 FPS throughout, so the performance was decent. Current gen consoles can play the Surge 2 at 60 FPS, which I personally haven't tested, but the console players reporting a very stable performance, which again is nice. In terms of DLC, there's weapon and gear packs, and only the one story DLC, the Kraken expansion, and again I haven't played this, but from what I've seen and heard, it's a very worthy DLC. The narrative and the boss battles are a very small blemish on the Surge 2, because overall it's a brilliant and equally satisfying Souls-like. The level design is one of the best I've seen in this genre, and the Surge 2 improves massively on the fluidity of the original Surge's combat mechanics, and ultimately that's usually why you're picking up a Souls-like anyway, and it's exactly why you should buy the Surge 2. Thanks for watching guys. If you've enjoyed the video, dropping a like goes a long way to helping the channel, and hopefully I'll see you in the next one.